It's coming.
Good morning. I'm Alan. Really happy to be here today at Container Day. Talk to you about Amazon EKS vision and roadmap. In the next 30 minutes, Mike and I are going to talk a bit about what we've been up to over the last 12 months, what we've been hearing from you as our customers, and give you a sneak peek into the EKS product roadmap. So let's get started. So EKS is used in every industry around the world, from finance to gaming to social media, transportation, retail, public sector. Our customers run EKS in every country, and they use EKS to deliver value for their businesses. So let's talk a bit about the tenets that we've anchored on with EKS Anywhere when we created the service. Our goal was to provide a managed service experience that focused on security and stability. We consider security as job zero, and I think from the last talk, you probably got an idea of all the investments that we're making around security. But our top priority is really to ensure that we're able to support production workloads that are running across every customer segment, from startups to global 2000 customers in every industry. In EKS, we've created millions of clusters, and we've handled hundreds of thousands of cluster upgrades. And at the scale that we operate, we consider change management to be extremely important, so that any change that we make across our fleet, we actually test and we validate to ensure that it doesn't impact any running applications. For example, for our CVEs, for some of the patches that we roll out across our fleet, there is typically no customer involvement. Our engineering team takes great pride in security and operational excellence. And on the product team, we actually consider security and reliability to be our top two product features. We're also committed. Our goal with EKS is to provide really a central place for you to manage all of your Kubernetes experience, from management to operations, and provide you all the tooling to be able to run Kubernetes clusters and operate applications across your environments. We've extended the deployment options available to Amazon EKS, from deploying on AWS to local zones to supporting outposts, and most recently with our investments with EKS Anywhere, we're providing you the ability to take EKS and run it on customer managed infrastructure in your own data center. We also took the EKS distro, which is really the Kubernetes that we run in EKS, and open sourced it and provide that for you to run on your existing environments using your own management tools as an option as well. With Amazon EKS Anywhere, we actually launched a service September 8. We went GA with EKS Anywhere. You'll actually, there's a session coming up in a bit that goes into detail with a demo. But with EKS Anywhere, we wanted to really provide our customers with an opinionated tool set for running and managing and operating EKS clusters in their own environments, right? In your customer managed environment. So the way we accomplish this is really take a set of open source tools like Cluster API for managing clusters, and package that in a way where you can install on your own infrastructure. So we actually package up a bunch of components with EKS Anywhere to really provide you that level of automation around cluster management. So for example, we package in a node operating system, which is BottleRocket. This is Amazon's container optimized operating system. We also support Ubuntu as a node operating system. We bundled in Cilium for pod networking policy and CNI. We are also bundling in Flux for change management, so the Flux controller for doing GitOps across your fleet of clusters. And EKS Anywhere actually runs both air-gapped It runs in semi-connected environments, partially connected, as well as fully connected environments. So you can take any EKS Anywhere cluster that you create and attach it to the EKS console. Last but not least, everything we bundle in, we support. So our customers can sign up for support for EKS Anywhere from AWS, and we will support all of the various components that we bundled into EKS Anywhere. We've extended the EKS console to actually enable you to attach to external clusters. So for example, any conformant Kubernetes cluster that's out there, you can install an agent on that cluster and then use the EKS console to attach to that cluster. Once attached, you're able to get basic observability around Kubernetes metadata for those clusters that are running within AWS and outside of AWS. In the future, we plan to invest in various areas around management operations for attached clusters. So the whole notion of infrastructure as code has been around for a while. Customers have been describing configuration as code and deploying in Git and leveraging Git workflow to do these types of operations for a long time. What's interesting about GitOps is it really brings the Kubernetes declarative model so that customers can really describe their clusters in such a way, think of it as the declarative state for their cluster and store that in Git, and then have Kubernetes controllers actually reconcile that state across those configurations that are defined in Git. This is an area that Amazon EKS is investing a great deal of time and energy in bringing the GitOps experience as a native experience for Amazon EKS. As a matter of fact, with EKS Anywhere, we've made GitOps really a native experience by bundling in the Flux controller as a means of leveraging Git to describe the configuration across EKS Anywhere clusters. And we plan to continue investing here and really extend that operating model all the way from EKS Anywhere into EKS on AWS so that now our customers can start to think of the world as far as change management in a consistent fashion across their clusters that are running pretty much anywhere EKS is running. We also heard from you that you want a simpler way to consume AWS services from Kubernetes, and part of the motivation behind the creation of the open source project called AWS Controllers for Kubernetes, ACK, was just that. So with ACK, we remove a lot of the undifferentiated heavy lifting required to consume AWS services from Kubernetes by providing you with controllers that make that much easier. And we've been doing a lot of work in this area over the last 12 months. As a matter of fact, we are going GA with a couple of services by the end of this year. Those services are Elasticache and SageMaker. And we've got a pretty rich roadmap of services that we're onboarding over the next 12 months. So really, when you think about it, the whole purpose in terms of our vision with Amazon EKS is really to enable you, our customers, to focus your time and energy on strategic operations and leave the tactical operation. Again, I'll use the term undifferentiated heavy lifting. We love that term. Leave that to AWS, right? Really around building your clusters, scaling your control plane, patching and securing your environment, setting up, performing the cluster upgrades, and at the end of the day, ensuring your applications are running resiliently on top of Kubernetes. We've been pretty busy. We've been listening to you and taking your feedback and building features and functionality over the last 12 months. There are various areas that we've really doubled down and have been investing in. If you think back to when EKS was first launched, our goal was really around providing a highly available, resilient, and secure control plane. Then we focused our efforts on kind of bringing that goodness to the worker nodes and bringing the Kubernetes API to the EC2 layer and providing more of a managed experience. In the last 12 months, it's really been focusing on things like region expansion, Osaka region, leveraging, supporting more and more Kubernetes versions, introducing different deployment options like EKS Anywhere, bringing EKS distro as an open source project to the community, enabling our customers to attach conformant Kubernetes clusters to the EKS console using our connector, support for OIDC, and it goes on and on and on. And we have a very rich roadmap that I'm going to hand it over to Mike to now talk about.
Okay, thanks, Alan. So you heard the vision. Now we're going to dive into some of the specifics of what's coming into the rest of this year and 2022. When we think about the roadmap, we're going to break it up into 4 buckets: security and reliability, performance and scale, management and observability, and consistency. And we're going to cover each of these, some of the things we've launched, and some of the things that are coming over the next year. So security, it's no mistake. You've heard this point hammered home and home already today. Bob talked about it. We had the security roundtable the last session. Alan mentioned it before. It's the top priority for a reason. It's the thing we spend probably the most time on. It's the feature that gets prioritized over everything else. And you saw this in the last session, but I wanted to touch again on the shared responsibility model. It differs a little bit whether you're using Fargate or bringing your own instances. But the point is, using a managed service like EKS, everything in orange is our responsibility. And so things like vulnerabilities in Kubernetes, Alan mentioned this, we're part of the product security committee that's responsible for triaging vulnerabilities. Oftentimes, when a CVE is announced, your cluster is already patched. You don't have to do anything. And that's not really a particular feature. You're not going to see a what's new post about it, but it's really something we spend a lot of time on. And then on your side of the responsibility model, what's in blue, a lot of the features on the roadmap are designed to make managing that shared responsibility on your side easier. And then reliability. Really the vision with an EKS cluster is you create the cluster, you get a Kubernetes endpoint, and that endpoint is going to respond whether you're running 5 worker nodes, 1,000 worker nodes. One of the benefits running EKS on AWS in the cloud is we get to take advantage of all the latest AWS innovations and infrastructure, whether that's moving etcd to run on the latest EBS volumes or the API servers to run on the latest EC2 instances. Even for existing clusters, you're going to get improved performance without having to do anything. It's just a benefit of using EKS. So some of the things we've launched, some of the things coming soon. On the managed node groups side, since the last time we talked, we launched support for taints and parallel node group upgrades. Taints lets you isolate workloads within a cluster. Parallel upgrades, if you're running worker nodes that are a node group with, say, 50 or more nodes, you can complete the upgrade in a faster amount of time. Again, version end of support dates. So I want to spend a little time on this one. One of the easiest ways that you can operate your cluster securely is to keep up with version updates. It's really probably the most critical part of that shared responsibility model. Kubernetes actively discourages vulnerability submissions for old versions. And so if you're on an old version, you might have a vulnerability that we don't even know about. So that's why we have the policy of the way it is. And the 117 end of support is coming next month. 118 is coming next year. So it's critical that you have an ongoing plan to upgrade Kubernetes versions. It's not just about getting new features, which of course that's great, but it's really about security. A couple other things I'll touch on here. I won't cover it all. One good example of your side of the shared responsibility model is IAM roles for service accounts. So while you can give permissions to your workloads by just adding policies to the worker node role, that really violates the principle of least privileges. And so with IAM roles for service accounts, you can give just the IAM permissions to the pods on a node that aren't shared with other pods. And this feature, we've heard it works really well with a smaller number of clusters, but we heard from you that you run into challenges when running multiple clusters across multiple accounts. And so we have plans to update how IAM rules for service accounts works to change the credential vending model to make it work across easier across multiple clusters. Another one I'll touch on here is cluster access management. Today, to give permissions to users to access your clusters, you do it through the AWS auth config map. And we've heard some challenges around managing authentication inside the cluster itself. And so we're working on a new set of EKS APIs to move that authentication into the EKS API itself. And that'll make it much easier to manage authentication through infrastructure as code tools like CloudFormation, Terraform. And then in addition to that, we'll also be adding an authorization layer. So for straightforward permissions use cases like giving a user read-only access to namespace A or cluster admin access to namespace B, you'll be able to do that directly through the EKS API without having to go through RBAC itself. So those are some of the features. There's a bunch of other ones here. There's always going to be a lot on the roadmap on security and reliability. It's first for a reason. So we recognize that many of you run in regulated environments, and EKS makes it easy for you to run those applications and meet the compliance requirements in those environments. The one I want to highlight here is FedRAMP and FedRAMP High. We achieved that compliance earlier this year, and there's additional ones on the roadmap. Okay, performance and scale. This is, I would say, after security reliability, the next most important set of features. And it applies to both the control plane, which we've really talked about, but then on your side, making sure that the system, your workloads can be scaled up and down dynamically and making it easy for you to make that availability trade-off of cost versus availability for your workloads. So a couple of things to highlight here that we've launched. Probably one of the top feature requests since we launched EKS was increased pod density. We made a somewhat unique choice when we launched EKS over 3 years ago now to build the networking plugin that integrates directly with the VPC. And it has a number of advantages because you get the raw networking performance of a VPC without a virtualized layer running on top. The downside of that is that we were beholden to how the VPC works. And in some cases on smaller worker nodes, you may not have been able to run pods and fully utilize the resources. And so to address this, we worked really closely with the EC2 team over the last year to build a container optimized VPC feature where you can attach prefixes of IP address blocks to nodes rather than individual ones. And then we added support for that in the CNI plugin. So you no longer have to worry about IP addresses as a constraint for achieving full efficiency on your worker nodes. And then scaling. So managed node groups scale to 0 phase 1. You can now manually scale managed node groups from 0 and back up. The API allows that. Phase 2 we're working on, which is a contribution upstream to Cluster Autoscaler, which will make it automatically scale back up and down based on requests with managed node groups. And then, so we are investing in Cluster Autoscaler, but of course, for some customers, we've heard challenges with Cluster Autoscaler, and that's why we've built Carpenter. We have a session on this later today that will go in much more detail, but the 1.0 launch of Carpenter will be coming later this year. You heard Bob mention IPv6 earlier today. While pod density, that problem has been solved at the node level, customers are running into IP challenges at the VPC level, where you may be running out before you can scale clusters. And so IPv6 is the solution to that. There'll be a talk on that later today where we'll give a demo of how it's going to work, and that one's coming soon. Okay, management and observability. This is a large topic with quite a big surface area. As you start to run more and more clusters with EKS and move more and more workloads, one of the easiest ways to make managing multiple clusters easier is to make managing a single cluster super easy. And so a lot of the roadmap, a lot of what we're working on is automated lifecycle operations to make managing that single cluster as easy as possible. And then on the observability side, it's really two-sided. It's on the control plane itself, and then it's your applications running in the cluster. How do we make it easy for you to ingest and understand insights that make it so you can improve performance, reduce cost, and minimize time to really troubleshoot issues. So some of the features that fall into this bucket. EKS connector, that was discussed, so giving you a way to connect non-EKS cloud clusters to the EKS console so you can observe and visualize what's going on in all of your clusters in a single place. And then additional EKS add-ons. We added support for core DNS and kube proxy earlier this year. We have a long roadmap of additional add-ons coming, open telemetry for observability, storage for CSI drivers, the load balancer controller, metric server. Those are all with the goal of making it super easy to manage lifecycle within a single cluster. Some of the other things on the roadmap, integrated GitOps. So like Alan mentioned, Flux is already bundled with EKS Anywhere. We're going to also make that an option to install directly through EKS add-ons, and that'll make change management across multiple clusters easier. Performance insights, I think it was mentioned in the last talk that we do expose Prometheus metrics for the control plane, but you still have to do the work of ingesting those metrics and analyzing them. We want to make that easier for you so you can just log into EKS, go to the console, see what's going on with your control plane without having to manually do that. Cost allocation, this is a big one, especially as you run more clusters. And if you're running clusters with different tenants from different teams, dev team A, dev team B are sharing the same cluster, you want to understand which of those teams are using which resources. And so next year, we'll be adding a feature into EKS where it makes it easy to see exactly what those costs are between different tenants at the namespace level all the way down to the pod level. Okay, and then finally, consistency. This one is really all about giving you the same consistent supported experience in any environment that you can run Kubernetes. When we launched EKS, it was EKS in the cloud. With the EKS Anywhere launch last month, we now give you that same experience for running Kubernetes in your own data center. And then portability. So with portability, it's really about being able to run in multiple environments without making significant changes. But at the same time, you should be able to take advantage of some of the unique features, whether it's performance, scalability in the environment that you're running in without having to make significant changes to your application. So EKS Anywhere, we've discussed. I think it's next, or the one after. We'll dive much deeper into EKS Anywhere. ACK, AWS Controllers for Kubernetes. This gives you a Kubernetes native option for managing AWS resources, and several controllers will be reaching GA later this year. CDK for Kubernetes. Again, consistency, using the languages you're used to define your applications. We'll have a talk on that later today. And then the last two I want to spend a little more time on. So multi-cluster. One of the challenges we hear as you start to run applications in more and more clusters is removing dependencies from service A and service B that are running in the same clusters or different clusters. It shouldn't really matter where they're running for them to talk to each other. And so we are working on implementing a controller that implements the upstream multi-cluster services API and uses Cloud Map as the backing layer. That'll give you a way to easily do service discovery across clusters without having to go to a full service mesh, where you may not need all of the features of a service mesh, you just need service discovery. So that's something that we're working on coming soon. And then lastly, I wanted to call out EMR and EKS. So this was a deployment option for EMR launched, I believe, late last year that can target EKS clusters. And today they support Spark, but in the future, they're working on adding additional frameworks like Flink, Presto. So again, the goal of consistency, whatever framework you need to run, you should be able to use the same tools that you're used to. And just to visualize this Kubernetes consistency, we've talked about it. EKS now supports many environments all the way from your own hardware to AWS regions, and then you can see the deployment options in between with outposts and local zones. And we have additional options coming next year that'll further slice up this graph, so you'll see additional ways where you can run Kubernetes. Finally, of course, I'm going to shout out the roadmap. this, a lot of what you just saw comes from the feedback you provide on the public roadmap. Myself, the other product managers, we're in this roadmap every day, seeing your feedback. If you have a feature request, go check the roadmap. Somebody else might have already opened it. You can +1 it. If you don't see it, open it. This is something that we look at quite frequently. If a feature on the roadmap is upvoted pretty highly, it's usually a good sign for us that it's something we should go build. And that's it. Thank you for coming. We have quite a full day ahead of different talks, and I hope you enjoy them. Thanks.